Hello, everyone. My name is Siva Jonnada. I'm the chair of the Whippany River Watershed Action Committee. Have been since 2021, and I've been in the Whippany River Watershed Action Committee since 2019. That's just a brief introduction of myself. I live in Morris Township, but I'm very familiar with Parsippany. I think I know more than half of these organizations in various ways, including my neighbor there, the Great Swamp Watershed, which deals with the upper Passaic River. So this is the Whippany River at Lake Pocahontas in Morristown. And what I'm going to talk about is the watershed area, and basically more than half of what your presenters are talking about, the fresh water supply. And then also what is a watershed and what is the watershed management, plus problems and solutions. Most importantly, what can you do? What WRWAC is a broad-based community action. We have projects. We do ongoing assessments, which I'm trying to get into, education, which is what we're doing now, and promoting the resource conservation, which everybody else in this area is doing here. And these are all the municipalities here, and you can see Parsippany, Troy Hills is one of them near the bottom, but there are 16 over here. They're either part or in whole in the Whippany watershed. And this is what the watershed is. And it goes from Mendham Township on the west, flows through Morris Township, Morristown, into Hanover, and then into East Hanover and Parsippany, which I'm going to tell more. It's located entirely in Morris County. Most of the other ones go as multiple counties. And it's only 16 miles long. In that small area, though, there's a lot to pack up because it goes through many historical areas within Morris County, within New Jersey, and it's a source of drinking water for over 1 million people. And it starts in Mendham Township. At the lower left-hand corner of that picture is the headwaters of the Whippany. One of the tributaries is Harmony Brook, which is a source for Clyde Potts Reservoir. Another one is Dismal Brook. I like to joke that the Passaic River has the Great Swamp, while Whippany has the Dismal Swamp. But even though we're small, we're still just as important. And it flows into Morristown near Speedwell Lake, which is where the telegraph was invented, and Lake Pocahontas. Before that goes through Lewis Morris Park, which is in Washington Valley, and these are some of the tributaries dealing with that. And then it goes through the Patriots Path, which is again Washington Valley, and then it goes through Morristown, Patriots Path to the east near Frelinghuysen Arboretum. Then it goes through Whippany Burial Grounds in Hanover, and then it goes through to East Hanover and then Parsippany, where first it empties into Rockaway River and then it empties into the Passaic River at the Great Peace Meadows. So now, how much water is available for human consumption? Only 3% of our water is from fresh water. 97% is oceans, but only 3%. But of that 3%, only a fraction of that, 0.3%, is surface water, which is rivers and lakes. So what is a watershed? It's a large basin made of land that drains into a body of water, such as a river or a lake or a stream. And this is a visual illustration of that. So you can see the highlands there, the water goes down through rain, and then it flows through into a stream. But how does that water come from? It goes through groundwater recharge, which is building through an aquifer. So that rain goes into water surface, it flows downward and fills up an aquifer, and this is an illustration of that. So when you talk about the headwaters, this is where the headwaters comes from. You see the precipitation goes into recharge, and that's why you want pervious coverage rather than impervious like blacktop. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So in New Jersey, we have what we're called watershed management areas. There are 20 of them. Anybody who lives in the Northeast, we live in a watershed area. We live in a watershed. So New Jersey has 20 watershed management areas. We are located in Watershed Management Area 6, which is the Rockaway River in the north, Whippany River in the middle, and the upper part of the Passaic River, which is the Great Swamp, to the south. And as I said, Whippany River flows into the Rockaway River, which then flows into the Passaic River. And then the Passaic River flows to the Great Falls in Patterson, and then empties into Newark Bay. And if you want a 3D version of it, you can go to my neighbor table there and see a topographical version of that. And you can see also where you live if you live in this area. It's a very fun thing to do. So what do we do in Whippany? Watershed management. Anything we do with watershed is watershed management. So good watershed management protects, maintains, and improves the quality and quantity of current water resources. And how do we do that? We maintain the surface and groundwater resources and encourage groundwater recharge. So this is an example of pervious coverage. So what we'd want to do is try to prevent water from collecting too much. Like if you have a blacktop, you want to have the blacktop prevents water from going into the ground. We're trying to encourage more groundwater recharge, and that's one of the ways we try to do with pervious coverage. And you also want to prevent quality degradation and protect public health and drinking water supplies. This is a picture of George Van Orden, who worked for Hanover Township, and he was instrumental in cleaning up the Whippany River. And we also want to prevent mitigating and flooding and implement best management practices for stormwater management. Those of us, we've been through all of the hurricanes. We call them 100-year storms, but they seem to happen almost every year, maybe every couple of years. This is a picture of Martin Luther King after Hurricane Irene back in 2011. And back there, the water was up to like 4 or 5 feet high. And that was an extreme storm, but we seemed to get those. And just a couple of years ago, we had Hurricane Ida. That area got flooded for a couple of days, and it was the river overflows. And wherever you are in Parsippany, I'm sure there you have areas that are heavily flooded too. So stormwater management is an important part of what we do. And we want to sustain healthy wildlife, and you mentioned the bats. The bats are one example, one of the parts of wildlife. All land animals need fresh water. We're one of the land mammals. And we also provide recreational activities, and we sponsor some kayak trips. We're talking about your watershed. All these colored areas here are called sub-watersheds. So you have the main watershed, but you also have the sub-watersheds based on their tributaries and where they empty in the river. Parsippany is like in 3 different parts of this. And when we want to do that, we're looking at water pollution. We're looking at point source and non-point source. Point source is things like the paper mill. People used to drain their waste into the river, and nothing was living in the river for a long time until about the 1980s. And some towns even would empty raw sewage into the river. But starting in the 1980s, that point source was starting to clean up, and the river is cleaner than it was. But this is an example of non-point source pollution. And non-point source pollution is things that you and I are responsible for. And you can see different examples of that, like feeding wildlife or just throwing things out. One thing that we noticed after the plastic ban a couple of years ago is we don't see as many plastic bags in these water streams, and that's an excellent reason why we have a plastic bag ban. And if anybody questions why we have it, just let them know with the dangers of the plastic bags, and that we're seeing less and less of that nowadays. But now, because of COVID, we're seeing a lot of face masks, and that's another issue that we want to do. They're not as big as plastic bags, but they're still a problem. And these are some of the things we do. We do projects like river cleanups, rain gardens, and water quality monitoring. Back in the early 2000s, we did a riparian buffer at Burnham Park. This is my neighborhood, actually. And on the bottom right is an example of a riparian buffer, and a riparian buffer is the natural vegetation which is at the edge of a stream bank, and it becomes a buffer between the shoreline and the water, and it clears up the pollution. One problem with the riparian buffer is some people think it's unsightly and they try to remove it. So that's part of what we try to do. We try to educate people as to the importance of why we need a riparian buffer. And this is a bioretention basin that was made. And near your place, there's the Parsippany, there's drainage. They had something called a filtera stream. The water would come into there. There's a water filter. One thing about this is expensive and it has to be maintained, but it's one way to try to clean the water. And as was mentioned before, the water drains into here and it goes into a water source. It does not go into a sewer system. So you also have to be careful about that. So having a clear storm drains are important. And then you have the rain garden. At the Parsippany Municipal Building, you have 4 rain gardens, which have not been maintained as well as they should, but that's something that we try to educate people on doing. And for example, in the Whippany, we had that installed back in 2020, but unfortunately, because lack of education on it, the DPW there cut it out. So that area does not have that riparian buffer. But in Mountain Lakes and Birchwood Lake, there is a woodland restoration riparian buffer, and that's continually being maintained by the local municipality and local Boy Scout troops and high school environmental clubs. And we're going to have our meeting over there just to show how that does, because the next stage is woodland restoration. But this is what we're trying to do, try to educate what is a rain garden, what is a riparian buffer, what do they do, why is it important? And this is an example of a rain garden. So a rain garden absorbs the water after rain, so the rain does not collect more than 48 hours. So if you do go to the one in Parsippany, after heavy rainfall, that water will just stay there for about a day or two and then disappear. So it won't pool and will prevent insects. So sorry about the bats not being fed that way, but we don't want to have too many mosquitoes there at the same time. So the rain garden still works. It's just that you don't see as many plants there. But that's one of the things we want to try to make people aware to maintain their rain gardens. And we also have a chronologue. I think Len Sipkin left, but Len Sipkin and I put this at the Speedwell Lake in Morristown. So a chronologue is a way to take a picture of this particular place through the season. So if you go to this chronologue area, chronologue.com, you can see for I think we installed it in 2021, for 2 years, you can see this area through the seasons. And whenever I have guests over here, you can go through that. And we also have community involvement. This is the opening of that rain garden. And we've had recognition. These are just 3 of the things that we've accomplished, including that rain garden. And these are our many partnerships. And we do river cleanups. For example, we're going to do a river cleanup at the Bethlehem Church. We've been doing it since Hurricane Irene, and we had a bio blitz. We're also going to have an Earth Day event in April. And we also removed this dumpster in August 2021. That dumpster has been there since Hurricane Irene in 2011. It just got washed into the river, and it was there for 10 years, and finally, through volunteer work, it was finally removed. I was even interviewed by TV. We do recreational activities and education, which is what I'm doing now. And these are some of the other things. I'm trying to get a water assessment seminar projects going on here. And this is something that Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill has given. 2 of her projects in the omnibus bill deal with the Whippany River, and it's about $2 million worth, which is a huge project for us. And as I mentioned, we have the Earth Day event. But what can you do? Know your watershed. Whenever you see these blue signs, know that you're at a watershed. And pick up after your pet. I know a lot of us have pets. Make sure we do that. Do not feed the wildlife. I know we used to always like to feed the ducks, but please don't do that. And dispose of hazardous materials. The MUA has a facility in Mount Olive to do that. And always assume any storm drain goes into a waterway. Just watch out for that. And let us know of anything that's happening, because we won't know anything unless you tell us. And you can go to WRWAC to that, and if this is a DVD, it's not a coaster, But instead of, if you don't have a DVD, you can go to the page and you can see that the same film about the Whippany streaming all the time. And just go to administrator at WRWAC.org and let us know about that. And or you can contact me or Jen O'Neill, who is our facilitator administrator, and just contact me and I can give this same presentation to you. And our vision is to clean the Whippany, clean it, protect it, and enjoy it. And I'll end with this nice haiku my friend of mine did. Thank you.